Hello, welcome to Business Week, where we take a look at key activities and major business stories in the week. I am Frank Omalape. Here's what's coming up in a moment. The federal government and organized labor agree in the week on 70,000 naira as the new national minimum wage. And Nigeria's inflation rate hit 34.19% in June 2024, up from 33.95% in May. Outside Nigeria, President Joe Biden rolls out a series of proposals aimed at lowering housing costs as home prices remain an issue ahead of the election this year. So these and many other stories are coming your way shortly. I am Frank Omalape, and this is Business Week. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Let's bring you some stories that made headlines in the week. 70,000 naira is the new national minimum wage that will be sent in a bill to the National Assembly for legislation before it becomes law. This was the outcome of a meeting between President Bola Tinubu and leaders of the Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress inside the presidential villa. This pact between the federal government and organized labor is expected to calm growing agitations and shelve all planned strikes. TVC News State House correspondent Femi Akode reports.
3 months after the expiration of the previous national minimum wage, a new one has been agreed between the federal government and organized private sector. This new minimum wage of 70,000 naira comes 1 month after the 37-member tripartite committee inaugurated by President Bola Tinubu submitted its report. After meeting the president for the second time, an agreement was reached, and with a caveat of negotiating a wage increase every 3 years.
We are taking this with mixed feeling because of the situation of the economy, but we have to move ahead. Despite the situation, and the negotiation can linger, coming from 62 to 70. And then with a promise that we'll come back soon to negotiate it. We are taking it back to our constituency to see how we can get a buy-in.
Why this became a catch, because we from organized labor, we have been pushing that the issue of 5 years review is too much, that a lot of economic indices may have changed because we are in an era where things are moving very fast in terms of both macro and microeconomic policies. But with also the caveat that this is going to be done every 3 years, 3 years, the next review will be 3 years. And after that pronouncement, we from Labour, just has been said that, well, we have received what the president has promised.
Beyond the wage increase, President Bola Tinubu made some concessions on behalf of the federal government. He directed that all contentious issues with the Non-Academic Staff Union of Universities and the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities be resolved. The federal government will also expedite measures to reduce the impact of economic reforms on citizens.
More money is going to go into the acquisition of more buses, the CNG buses. Nigeria is going to be more CNG compliant, according to the president. We are moving in this transition to renewable and all other things that Mr. President has assured Labour.
He promised and asked that the Minister of Finance, coordinating economy and budget and the economic planning should make sure that they go back to books, because he has the discretion to look into of NASU, ASU, and SANU and all that, and so that their money should be paid.
The federal government hopes the effect of this agreement reached with the NLC and TUC will buy it more time as it continues with the implementation of policies that will have direct impact on lives and livelihood.
Elsewhere in the week, the Norwegian Seafood Council is pushing for sustainable seafood practices and regulatory alignment between Norway and Nigeria. This stance was highlighted at a seminar held in Lagos where discussions focused on including stockfish in the federal government's import duty waiver list to improve access to quality protein for Nigerians. TVC News Senior Business Correspondent Ifuna Eze has more.
The one-day seminar underscored the need to enhance productivity, regulatory compliance and bilateral relations between Nigeria and Norway, particularly in the seafood trade. Key stakeholders, including the Norwegian ambassador and regulatory authorities, emphasized the importance of expanded duty exemptions and closer regulatory cooperation to boost industry growth and food security.
The government has presented a proposal to have a duty-free window for some food products that would make it easier for Nigerian people to get food on the table. And there are a few products on that list, but we would like to suggest that the stockfish heads could be part of that list as well.
Increasing cooperation between Nigeria and Norway, and not at least try to increase the export or the import of the dried seafood, the stockfish, which we think is very important of the Norwegian and Nigerian culture. It's been going on for more than 100 years. I'm sure it's going to go on for more than 100 years more. And this is something that connects our two countries together.
Presentations at the seminar explored advancements in cod fish processing, emphasizing knowledge exchange and partnership opportunities.
What the Norwegian Seafood Council does to support the importation of fish and also the exploit of government to grow fish production in Nigeria is paramount to the ministry. And the ministry is seeking cooperation and partnership to better fish production in Nigeria.
What is disturbing Nigeria's export is the issue of quality assurance, sustainability, and being current with what goes on in the world in the field of aquaculture. So we are ready, and part of our social responsibility is to create awareness.
Participants commended the seminar for promoting dialogue and urged continued collaboration among stakeholders to strengthen the seafood sector. They also highlighted the importance of leveraging technology to streamline clearance processes and ensure accurate import valuation.
Away from there now, the latest data from the National Bureau of Statistics reveals that Nigeria's inflation rate hit 34.19% in June, up from 33.95% in May. The report, which was released earlier in the week, shows an increase of 0.24% when compared to the May 2024 headline inflation rate. On a year-on-year basis, the headline inflation rate was 11.4% higher than the 22.79% recorded in June 2023. The food inflation rate in June 2024 also jumped to 40.87% on a year-on-year basis. That's about 15.62% higher than the 25.25% posted in June. According to NBS, the rise in food inflation was caused by increases in prices of millet, whole grain garri, guinea corn, yam, water yam, cocoa yam, groundnut oil, palm oil, bread, and cereals, among others. But while the Lagos state government is implementing measures to address the rising cost of food prices and build a proper reserve management system in the state. This comes following the rebranding of the Ministry of Agriculture to Ministry of Agriculture and Food Systems. Ms. Abisola Olusoya, Commissioner for Agriculture and Food Systems in Lagos, while speaking during the official rebranding of the ministry, said that the essence is to review the activities of the ministry and periscope ahead of a better performance towards managing the current food crisis and ensuring food sufficiency in Lagos. Ms. Olusoya said that food production is an entire system that accommodates numerous activities, and Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu's administration is leveraging on quality partnership to drive this process.
The administration of Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu has done quite a number of things. We believe that there's still so much more to be done. We have only just touched a tip of the iceberg, which is why we are also collectively asking that Lagosians, we all get into some kind of urban farming. Grow something in your home that you can eat. It helps to lessen the burden as a society. With regards to the storage facilities, we are looking at creating more storage infrastructure having policies around this, and also frameworks and roadmaps, and also to develop processes and partnerships for the food storage and reserve management.
Elsewhere in the week, the International Monetary Fund has downgraded Nigeria's 2024 economic growth forecast to 3.1% from the 3.3% previously estimated. This was revealed in its latest World Economic Outlook titled The Global Economy in a Stick Sport. However, the global organization retained its 2025 growth forecast of 3%. IMF applauded Nigeria and other sub-Saharan African countries for tightening their monetary policies by projecting a decline in inflation, and monetary policies may soon be on the horizon. Additionally, IMF acknowledged Nigeria's plans to resume cash transfers to vulnerable populations as a commendable effort to shield citizens from numerous economic shocks. And outside Nigeria, President Joe Biden has rolled out a series of proposals aimed at lowering housing costs as inflation and elevated home prices are shaping up as decisive issues for voters this year. According to the White House, the first proposal will withdraw tax credit from landlords who raise rent by more than 5% per year, beginning this year and for the next 2 years. This will apply only to larger landlords who have more than 50 units in their portfolio, which count for more than 20 million rental units across the country. The policy also includes an exception for new construction and buildings that are being substantially renovated. This is aimed at incentivizing a new rental property construction to increase the supply of apartments and homes for rent and subject to congressional approval. And those were some of the biggest stories in the week. Now, coming up after this break, our focus is on the persistent rise in the prices of food as Nigeria's food inflation continues to surge amid federal government's interventions in the sector. That's our talking point in a moment. Please stay with us. This is Business Week. And if you just joined us, this is Business Week broadcasting from our studios here in Lagos. Let's get into our conversation now. It's been 1 year since the federal government declared a state of emergency in the agricultural sector and rolled out various interventions to address the country's food security crisis. But the surging cost of food continues to impact the nation as prices of food have more than doubled in the last 1 year. With this is despite the administration's efforts to boost local food production, enhance the supply chain, and shield consumers from the impact of rising prices. According to NPA's report, food inflation rose to 40.87% in the month of June, with prices of staple commodities such as rice, beans, and grains continue to soar, far outpacing the government's effort to stabilize the market. But what are the fundamental issues that requires paying attention to? Let's provide some perspective on this development. I'm joined by an associate financial market at Apex, Aisat Dahoud. Thank you for joining us, Aisat. Let's get into the conversation now. Since the federal government declared a state of emergency in the agri sector in July last year, 2023, food inflation has been on the rise by more than 11% to 40.87% in June 2024. How would you measure the progress at the FS? Additionally, what factors would you say have contributed to the persistent rise in food prices despite the various interventions from the federal government?
So let's start by assessing the reason behind the declaration for state of an emergency in the food sufficiency in the agricultural value chain. So we'll start with when the current administration assumed the position. That's in 2023. Upon inauguration, fuel subsidy was removed. From removal of subsidy, we had the flotation of the naira, whereby exchange rate was allowed to play itself out in the market. Removing the fuel subsidy has impact on all forms of businesses. All this led to the rising surge of food staples in market, thereby causing inflation. 2023 inflation was about 26%. Food inflation was about 25%. It was majorly driven by food inflation. Looking at it today, food inflation is about 31% thereabout, and food inflation has surged as high as 40.87%, like you mentioned. Upon declaring the state of emergency for food sufficiency, the government highlighted the reason in a bid to address the rising cost of food staples, the government declared the state of emergency, thereby approving for anything matters that has to do with food, water affordability, and accessibility to be under the purview of the National Security Council. And they declared the immediate, medium to long-term interventions. Immediate interventions that were explored were, disbursement of fertilizers, agri inputs, and grains to farmers. That's where there are immediate interventions. The medium to long-term interventions were to explore and partner with the Ministry of Waters to ensure an efficient irrigation system for the farmers. They also partnered with stakeholders like Natural and the likes, and even they went as far as, putting in partner that they wish to create the National Commodity Board for price stability mechanism. All these interventions have been explored, but a year after, we're still seeing the rise in food staples and food inflation is still surging. Look at it. A year ago, you can afford a loaf of bread at 500 naira or below. And currently, to get a loaf of bread, you have to get about 1,500 naira. Rice, look at rice, the price has skyrocketed, and all this has been as a result of the impact and effect of the macros on the agricultural value chain, not to talk of the actual challenges in the agricultural value chain.
Well, the fact is that several interventions were rolled out, as I said earlier, to support this directive, but the recent being the suspension of duties, tariffs, and taxes for the importation of certain food commodities for about 6 months. Of course, that's it. But the government is optimistic that food prices will crash by January 2025. How do you see this move impacting the prices of food items and stabilizing the market in the days ahead?
The import duty-free on certain agricultural commodities. Let's start from the reason behind this. Okay, food inflation, the cost of living, affordability of basic food staples continues to rise. And in the immediate, they see the temporary solution. And to mention, AFEX actually established in our commodity outlooks earlier in the year that, we foresee the international market prices coming to price stands lower than domestic prices, thereby making importation a convenient option to explore for people in the agricultural value chain. And to not think about it now, the import duty is just a temporary solution explored by the government to ease affordability of common food staples, and in the immediate to long term, immediately will have a negative impact on prices because the supply gap would kind of shorten. However, there is a potential opportunity for local producers to build their reserve. That's if we have the adequate infrastructure in place, talking of road networks, transportation network, both road and rail, and storage facilities, standard storage facilities. Imagine if we have adequate supply now with the duty-free importation for certain agricultural commodities like wheat, rice, cowpeas, and the likes. If we have adequate supply now, local producers can harvest, keep their commodities at the right moisture content, at the right quality, in advance for when the commodities are now in season, so that they can sell at reasonable prices and not sell at ridiculous prices whereby we're losing value, or even prevent post-harvest wastage. So you see, this 150-day duty-free for importation of certain commodities has both a positive and negative impact. In the short run, yes, we are going to see a negative impact on prices because there will be excess supply, both from those ones benefiting from the import duty and local producers would also be harvesting. However, government is looking to mitigate these negative prices as much as by recommending a recommended retail price for those commodities that are going to benefit from the 150-day import duty-free.
Let's look at the harvest season and post-harvest seasons. These are crucial in determining the trajectory of food prices. But let's talk about your expectations. What are your expectations for the coming harvest seasons, and what measures do you think need to be in place to ensure a smooth supply of food?
To bridge the supply gap, my expectations, let's start from the international market. In the international market, cocoa has witnessed the 2-time supply deficit consecutively, in past years. And in the international market, it's still expected to see another supply deficit for certain commodities in the 2024-2025 trading season. Now, bringing it down to the local market, Nigeria being heavily dependent, that's the agricultural input company, being heavily dependent on international importation of key ingredients or semi-finished products for agricultural inputs. So being heavily dependent on that, we're going to be talking of Forex. If FX remains unfavorable with the flotation of the Naira, if FX should remain unfavorable, we're going to have high cost of agri input. If that should happen, high cost of agri inputs, it's going to have a ripple-down effect on prices of commodity. Now, looking at harvest season is near for certain, almost all the commodities. So we're talking of cocoa should be around October, thereabout. And we have rice currently in season. When a commodity is in season, the prices are set to be lower than when it's not in season. So if you have excess supply, should we have excess supply when commodities are in season, when they're trading in season, we should be able to build standard storage facilities to keep these commodities to when they're not in season, which will form as some sort of price stability mechanism for the people in the value chain and even for consumers that are buying it. And it will have a positive effect on food inflation or cost of food, generally speaking.
Well, finally, let's look at, effort of this intervention, especially with the waiver on importation of food, right? So we see a lot of this effort and intervention on the part of the government, but most Nigerians wants to start seeing the result of this effort. What more do you think the government can do to provide immediate relief to address high food insecurity?
In the immediate, it will still be bridging the supply gap. How do we want to bridge the supply gap? They've done what they can do. Is it working? It's not just about, it's execution. For me, I would say execution is the key to whatever strategy or whatever intervention that's been explored or they're willing to explore. So now we need to trace our steps back to see the previous interventions that have been done, how it was executed. Was it well executed? If it was well executed, or what are the lapses? Because it can't be perfect in it all. So what are the lapses and the learning points for them to take into consideration? So for instance, the immediate disposal of seedlings, fertilizers, and grains to farmers, to ease affordability and to increase yield in production. They need to trace back their steps to the execution and see how well it was executed. And if the farmers are actually practicing this new modern agricultural practices that tends to address adverse climate issue, because we have both, erratic rainfalls and insufficient rainfalls are adversely to the food production capacity of the nation. So they have adverse effect on the food production capacity of the nation. So we need to see how they are doing this. Execution is key. That's all I can think of.
Well, I think a good place to leave it. Thank you so much for your time. Associate Financial Market at FX. I started Daho. Thank you for joining us on Business Week.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You've been watching Business Week coming to you from our studios here in Lagos. Just before we touch down with the show today, let's tell you that the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee, FAC, has shared a total sum of 1.35 trillion naira June revenue among the federal government, state and local government councils. The committee, in a communique, said the 1.35 trillion total revenue comprised statutory revenue of 142.5 billion naira and value-added tax revenue of 523.97 billion naira. Accordingly, out of the 1.35 trillion total revenue, the federal government received total sum of 459.7 billion naira, while state government received total sum of 461.9 billion, and the local government councils received total sum of 337.01 billion naira. And that's our show this week. Thank you everyone for sharing your weekend with us. I am Frank Omalape.
The Inspector General of Police has met with senior officers to review the state of security.
We are continuing our coverage of the arrest of Godwin Emefiele.
The Senate has summoned